The auction house reeked of chemical sterilizers and desperation. Marcus Webb stood among the crowd of buyers, his worn jacket marking him as someone who didn't belong in this gleaming establishment. Around him, wealthy merchants and collectors whispered in dozens of languages, their eyes fixed on the transparent holding cells that lined the walls. He shouldn't be here. The money in his account represented 3 years of salvage work in the asteroid belts, every credit earned through sweat and near-death encounters with derelict ships. But when he'd seen the auction listing during a routine station stop, something had compelled him to attend. The auctioneer, a tall Brevian with silver scales, activated the next display cell. The crowd leaned forward. Inside stood a girl who looked perhaps 20 in human years, though Marcus knew appearances meant nothing when dealing with alien species. Her skin held an iridescent quality, shifting between pale blue and violet depending on the angle of light. Wild tangles of white hair fell past her shoulders, and her eyes blazed with an unsettling golden luminescence. She wore only tattered fabric that might have once been a uniform of some kind. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't her appearance. It was the way she moved. She prowled the small space like a caged predator, her bare feet making no sound on the metal floor. When she looked at the gathered crowd, her lip curled back to reveal teeth that seemed just slightly too sharp. "Lot 47, the auctioneer announced. "Species unknown. Discovered in the wreckage of a research vessel near the Kelver Nebula. Age estimated between 18 and 25 standard years. No verbal communication established. Displays aggressive tendencies and resistance to standard pacification methods." A Thronix merchant near Marcus snorted. "Worthless. Can't even be properly trained." The auctioneer continued, unfazed. "Starting bid? 500 credits." Silence filled the hall. Marcus watched the girl press her palms against the transparent barrier, those golden eyes scanning the crowd with obvious intelligence despite the auctioneer's claims. She wasn't mindless. She was calculating, watching, waiting. 500 credits, the auctioneer repeated. Surely someone sees potential here. 200, someone called from the back. For medical experimentation. The girl's head snapped toward the voice. Even through the barrier, Marcus could see the fury that transformed her features. She slammed both fists against the transparent wall, hard enough to make it reverberate. The crowd stepped back nervously. "Aggressive specimen," the potential buyer muttered. On second thought, withdrawal. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Medical experimentation. They'd cut her apart to understand what she was, catalog her organs, study her until there was nothing left to study. He'd seen the aftermath of such research during his salvage runs. The images still haunted his dreams. 100 credits, another voice called. Avorian in expensive robes. For gladiatorial entertainment. The girl threw herself against the barrier again, and this time Marcus heard a sound escape her throat. Not quite a scream, not quite a growl. Something primal that made his instincts scream danger. Yet beneath the fury, he recognized something else. Fear. This wild creature who terrified everyone in the room was absolutely terrified herself. Any other bids? The auctioneer's tone suggested he expected none. Marcus raised his hand before his brain could override the impulse. 5,000 credits. Every head in the auction house turned toward him. The Vorian's eyes widened. The auctioneer blinked twice. "I'm sorry. Did you say 5,000? "Yes." Marcus kept his voice steady, despite the insanity of what he was doing. 5,000 credits. Most of his savings. Gone in 2 words. The girl stopped her assault on the barrier. Those golden eyes locked onto him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if she could see directly into his thoughts. 5,000 credits from the human gentleman, the auctioneer said, clearly pleased. "Any counter bids?" The Vorian glared at Marcus, but shook his head. No one else spoke. Sold to buyer 742 for 5,000 credits. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the transfer bay as station security loaded a reinforced containment pod onto his ship's cargo lift. Through the pod's small window, he could see the girl crouched in the corner, watching him with those unnerving eyes. "You sure about this?" the security officer asked. "Things dangerous. Already injured 2 handlers during transfer." "I'll manage," Marcus said, though he had no idea if that was true. The officer shrugged and departed. Marcus sealed the cargo bay and approached the pod slowly. The girl tracked his movement, tensing like she expected an attack. "Okay," he said quietly. "Here's the situation. I don't know what you are, or where you came from. I don't know if you understand me, but I saw what they wanted to do to you, and I couldn't let that happen." No response. Just those golden eyes studying him. Marcus took a breath. "I'm going to open this pod. You can attack me if you want, but my ship's in flight, and there's nowhere to go. Or you can trust that I mean you no harm." He reached for the release mechanism. The girl's pupils contracted to slits. The pod opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Marcus stepped back, giving her space. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, cautiously, she emerged. She moved like liquid, every muscle coiled and ready to spring. She was taller than he'd thought, nearly his height. This close, he could see faint markings along her neck and arms, patterns that might have been natural, or might have been scars. She circled him at a distance, never taking her eyes off his face. Marcus stayed still. "My name is Marcus. This is my ship, the Wanderer. You're safe here." She completed her circle and stopped directly in front of him. Then, without warning, she reached out and placed one hand flat against his chest, right over his heart. Her palm was surprisingly warm. She held it there for several seconds, and Marcus had the distinct impression she was learning something from the contact. When she withdrew her hand, some of the wildness had left her expression. Not all of it, but enough that she no longer looked ready to tear his throat out. Over the following days, Marcus learned to coexist with his unexpected passenger. She refused to stay in the small cabin he'd prepared, instead claiming a corner of the cargo bay where she could see all entrances. She ate the food he provided, but only after watching him eat first. She never slept when he was awake. But slowly, incrementally, she began to relax. On the 3rd day, she followed him to the cockpit and watched with obvious fascination as he navigated through a dense asteroid field. On the 5th day, he found her examining his collection of old books, her fingers tracing the text as if trying to decode it. On the 7th day, she spoke. Marcus. Just his name, in a voice that sounded rough from disuse, but unmistakably intelligent. She pointed at herself. Kira. He nearly dropped the tool he was holding. Kira? Is that your name? She nodded once, then pointed at the viewport where stars streaked past. Home. Lost. 2 words that contained volumes of meaning. She'd had a home. She'd lost it. The research vessel where they'd found her, the tattered uniform she'd worn. Pieces of a story he might never fully understand. I'm sorry, Marcus said. Kira tilted her head, studying him with an expression that might have been curiosity. Then she did something that shocked him more than her speaking. She smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but genuine. Not sorry, she said carefully. You chose, when others did not. Marcus thought about the auction house, the silence when no one wanted to bid, the callous suggestions of experimentation and entertainment. He thought about the impulse that had made him raise his hand and speak, when every logical part of his brain had screamed not to. Yeah, he said. I chose. Kira nodded as if this confirmed something important. She returned her attention to the viewport, and Marcus did the same. Somewhere out in that vast darkness was whatever remained of her home. Somewhere out there were answers to who and what she was. But for now, in this moment, she was here, safe, free, no longer a lot number in an auction house, but a person with a name and a story. Marcus set course for the outer colonies, places where questions weren't asked and backgrounds didn't matter. He had no plan beyond getting them both far from the core systems where people trafficked in lives and futures. Whatever came next, they'd figure it out together. Behind him, Kira made a soft sound that might have been contentment. When he glanced back, she'd settled into the co-pilot's chair, her wild white hair catching the light from the console displays. She looked less like a feral creature and more like what she'd probably always been beneath the fear and fury. A survivor. Just like him, the Wanderer jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the auction house and everything it represented far behind. In the quiet hum of the engines, Marcus allowed himself to hope that his impulsive choice might have been the right one after all. Sometimes humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology, or its weapons, or its vast colonial reach. Sometimes it was simply the willingness to see a person where others saw only a thing, and to choose compassion when no one else would venture to care.